What's up, Geeks and Gamers? It's Odin coming back with another video, and it's been a while since I've done a box office breakdown for the channel, so thank you for continuing to support Geeks and Gamers, and also continuing to show the love. I've heard a lot of people come to my channel or on Friday Night Tights say that they missed the box office breakdowns, and so I have yet another one for you. So please be sure to smash that like button. It really does mean a lot and helps us out a lot on the Geeks and Gamers channel. So let's go ahead and dive into what movies came out this weekend, because we're still living in the pandemic times, and so therefore a lot of theaters are still closed. There's also a lot of size restrictions and limitations in various theaters as well, which is having an impact on how well or how not well certain theaters and certain movies can actually do. This weekend, we actually had two movies coming out here domestically. We had Mortal Kombat, which of course was a film that a lot of people have been able to see. I was a little bit mixed on. I gave it a C+. I think it gives a lot of really cool fan service elements, but as far as an actual objective movie, it leaves a lot to be desired. But another film finally came to the shores of the domestic marketplace, and that was Demon Slayer, the movie. And this is a film, of course, that made history as being the highest grossing film ever in Japan, beating out Spirited Away. And the fact that it was able to do that during pandemic times is pretty darn impressive. And by the very fact that it was in around 2,000 or so, about 1,500 to 2,000 less theaters than Mortal Kombat, and almost beat Mortal Kombat in its opening weekend here domestically, just goes to show you that there are indeed a lot of anime fans around the world, including here in the States and in Canada. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into some of these numbers. So Mortal Kombat made around $23 million domestically over the weekend, which is actually better than what they had projected. Early projections had the film making somewhere between around 13 and 17 million, so it definitely outdid the projections there. And so Mortal Kombat showing that there are indeed a lot of people in the United States that do want to support these movies, that do want to go back into theaters. Obviously, there's probably a lot of other people who we can't really account for because they watched on HBO Max, and Lord knows when it comes to streaming services, they don't really tend to release those numbers, or at least in any way that we can really trust them with. So anyway, $23 million though, very strong start domestically for Mortal Kombat. Demon Slayer, as I mentioned, had also a very strong opening weekend domestically, making $21 million at just at 1,600 theaters. That's $13,000 per theater, whereas for Mortal Kombat, it was $7,000 per theater. So it actually made twice the amount of money, meaning it was twice essentially the amount of people at those theaters, even though, of course, there were less of them available, meaning that this movie has a lot of support, a lot of anime and manga fans here in the States. Godzilla vs. Kong, which is now in its fourth weekend, continues to make money. It made $4.2 million, which is another 45% drop from the previous week. Godzilla vs. Kong is definitely doing well as far as movies to come out during the pandemic. Right now, its total domestic gross is around $86 million. There are some people who speculated it could have been the first film to make over $100 million domestically during the pandemic. I've said this on my own channel, I don't know how possible that is because it's in its fourth week. It's dropping pretty consistently. There's newer movies that are coming out causing some competition. And so if it does reach the $100 million mark, it's going to have to very much just slowly creep there. But every week, it's going to lose theaters. It's going to lose people watching it. And so therefore, the chance of it getting $100 million, it's still possible, but it's becoming less and less likely. A film that I personally am a big fan of is the movie Nobody, which is kind of a John Wick-esque type movie if you've never seen it yourself. Made a respectable $1.7 million for being a smaller movie and having reached $21 million domestically. Again, a smaller movie like that, based on Bob Odenkirk, who I'm a pretty big fan of with his work on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, really isn't a household name for most people. So the fact that the film is indeed making some money during the pandemic times is pretty awesome. Going into each of these movies in a little bit more detail, Mortal Kombat worldwide has made around $51 million. So that's adding in the international marketplace. Right now, it is doing best in Russia, which is pretty interesting to see as a country doing well in. As you can see, there is no number here for China, which actually for the numbers is a pretty good thing, because most studios, when they do work with China, they have to make those deals with the devil, right? They have to make those deals with the Chinese Communist Party over there. And so in order to do that, it means that they only get, the studios, that is, only get about 25% of any of the box office grosses, whereas 75% of that goes to the commies. And so the fact that this is not having any money yet going to the commies is actually a good thing, because at $51 million, it means that they'll see a lot more of that money versus some other movies that I'll talk about a little bit later. Talking about Mugen Train, or this is Demon Slayer in its full name. As you can see, it's already reached worldwide $456 million. Obviously, the vast majority of that is from Japan. Again, it is the largest grossing film in Japan, making $356 million in that country alone during a pandemic, which again also shows that if you put out something that people actually want to see and doesn't have crazy identity politics in it, guess what? People are actually going to go see it. South Korea giving it a respectable $14 million as well. So this is definitely one of the most successful box office stories of the pandemic thus far. Godzilla vs. Kong is at around $406 million worldwide, which you would think is a pretty good thing. Again, especially in comparison to King of the Monsters, it's definitely pacing a lot better than that movie and doing a lot better than that movie. The biggest issue with this film, though, is look at where most of the money is coming from. $182 million worth of that international box office is coming from China, which again, they only get about 25% of when everything is said and done. Some have tried to argue that because there's a Chinese company that's one of the producers or owns one of the production companies behind it, that would mean that they wouldn't have to worry about it. Because they wouldn't have to have the same type of deal, because that 25% is more so for Western audiences and Western studios. And that very well could be true, but in the end, we know a lot of that money that's being made at the box office is going to be going to the government there and not to the actual studio, which means that even though it's a large number, a lot of it's not going to actually be going back to the studios who paid for Godzilla vs. Kong, and so therefore it's kind of misleading as to whether or not this film is going to be financially successful, at least based on how much the projected budget and therefore marketing costs would be as well. And then talking about Nobody, 38